So I gotta get this off my chest. Something happened to me and my buddies a few nights ago, something I can't explain, something that's been keeping me up at night. I figured maybe sharing it here might help me make sense of it all, or at least let others know what happened in case it happens to them. It was my best friend's birthday, right? We had this big shindig at his place, a bunch of us hanging out, having a good time, you know how it is. But as the night wore on, things started winding down, and before we knew it, it was way past midnight. Now, I ain't one for staying out too late, especially when I gotta work in the morning, but we were having so much fun, I lost track of time. Anyway, me and my two buddies, Jake and Mark, we decided it was time to call it a night and head home. Mark's car was parked a bit away, so we had to walk through this dark, lonely road to get to it. It was pitch black, except for the headlights of passing cars every now and then. The kind of road that gives you the creeps, you know? As we were walking, we saw this figure up ahead, just standing there on the side of the road. At first, we thought maybe it was someone who needed help or something, but as we got closer, we realized something was off. The guy was just standing there, completely still, staring straight ahead. It was like he was waiting for something. Now, I don't know what possessed us to do it, but we decided to stop and see if he needed a ride. I mean, it was late, and he looked kinda lost out there in the middle of nowhere. So, we pulled up alongside him and rolled down the window. "Hey, buddy, you need a lift?" Jake called out. The guy didn't say anything at first. He just kept staring ahead, like he was in some sort of trance. But then, slowly, he turned to look at us, and I swear, his eyes were the darkest things I've ever seen. It sent a shiver down my spine, I tell you. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded and climbed into the back seat without saying a word. We didn't really know what to make of him, but we figured he was just some guy down on his luck or something. We were wrong. Dead wrong. As soon as he got in the car, things started feeling off. The air got colder, and this feeling of dread settled over us like a thick fog. None of us said anything, but I could tell we were all thinking the same thing. We had made a mistake picking this guy up. We tried to make small talk, you know, to break the tension, but the guy just sat there in silence, staring out the window. It was unnerving, to say the least. But then things took a turn for the worse. We were about halfway to Mark's car when the guy in the back seat suddenly spoke up, his voice low and gravelly. "Take me to the old church," he said. Now, I don't know about you, but that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. The old church was miles away, and it was abandoned for a reason. People said it was haunted or cursed or something. Either way, it was the last place on earth I wanted to go. But before any of us could protest, the guy in the back seat spoke again, his voice dripping with malice. "Take me to the old church," he repeated louder this time. I don't know what came over us, but we found ourselves turning off the main road and heading towards the old church. It was like we were being controlled, like we had no choice in the matter. And all the while, the guy in the back seat just sat there, smiling to himself like he knew something we didn't. When we finally reached the old church, I felt my heart sink. The place looked even creepier up close, like something out of a horror movie. But before we could even think about turning back, the guy in the back seat spoke one final time. "Thank you for the ride," he said. And with that, he got out of the car and disappeared into the darkness, leaving us alone in front of the old church. We didn't stick around to see what happened next. We peeled out of there as fast as we could. I don't know who or what that guy was, but I know one thing for sure: he wasn't human. And I prayed to God we never see him again. I gotta tell you about this crazy thing that happened to me. Me and my wife were all pumped up for a trip to the hills and mountains. We'd been planning it for ages, you know? Finally got everything packed up in the car, ready to roll. So we set off in the afternoon, aiming to reach the mountains by evening. The drive was supposed to be around 5 hours or so. We had some snacks, A playlist full of our favorite tunes, and each other's company. Everything seemed perfect. But let me tell you, things started to get real weird as the sun dipped down and the darkness crept in. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dense jungle on either side of the road. The trees were like looming giants, casting eerie shadows in the moonlight. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. My wife, she was dozing off in the passenger seat, but I was wide awake, gripping the steering wheel tight. Every little rustle in the trees made my heart skip a beat. It was like the jungle was alive, watching us as we passed through. Then, out of nowhere, I saw her, standing there in the middle of the road, illuminated by the headlights. At first, I thought it was my wife. But as we got closer, I could see something was off. Her face was twisted into this grotesque, unnatural grin. Her eyes were pitch black, like there was no soul behind them. I slammed on the brakes. My wife woke up, startled, and asked me what was wrong. But when I looked back at the road, she was gone. Vanished into thin air. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. We kept driving, the tension thick in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like something sinister was lurking in the shadows. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I saw her again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Surrounding her were these dark, shadowy figures, their eyes glowing with malice. I swerved to avoid them, heart racing as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. But when I looked over at my wife, she was gone. Vanished into thin air just like before. I pulled over to the side of the road, hands shaking as I tried to catch my breath. My wife was nowhere to be found. I searched frantically, calling out her name into the darkness, but there was no response. I knew I had to do something, so I called the police. They arrived a short while later, but by then, it was too late. They found her body deep in the heart of the forest, lifeless and cold. I still don't know what happened that night. Whether it was some kind of hallucination or something more sinister. All I know is, I'll never forget the terror of that drive to the hills, and the horror of seeing my wife transform into something otherworldly. Hey guys, I gotta tell you about the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. It was just a regular night, or so I thought. I worked the night shift at the office, and that night I left work around 12:30 a.m. Yeah, it's late, but that's just the gig, you know? Anyway, I was driving home, taking the usual route. Now, this route goes through some dark forests, and let me tell you, at night, those trees look like something out of a horror movie. But I'd driven through them plenty of times before, so I didn't think much of it. So, there I was, cruising along, trying to stay awake. I had my windows down, hoping the cool night air would keep me alert. But then, something strange happened. I saw this weird shadowy figure dart across the road up ahead. I slammed on the brakes. But when I looked closer, there was nothing there. Just darkness. I shook my head, chalking it up to fatigue messing with my mind. But then I saw it again. This time, it was closer, and I could swear it looked like a person. I felt a chill run down my spine as I peered into the darkness. But once again, there was nothing there when I looked again. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease as I continued driving. But then I heard something. It was a faint whisper, almost like the wind through the trees. I strained my ears, trying to make out what it was saying, but it was just gibberish. I told myself it was probably just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then, things got really freaky. I saw headlights in my rearview mirror, and at first I thought it was just another car. But as it got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. It was this eerie glow, like nothing I'd ever seen before. It seemed to be pulsating, almost alive. I felt a wave of panic wash over me as the glowing figure drew closer. I tried to speed up, but no matter how fast I went, it stayed right on my tail. It was like it was toying with me, playing some twisted game. I was about to pull over and call the cops when suddenly, my friend's voice crackled over the radio. He sounded terrified, like he was in real trouble. He was begging for help, saying he was being chased by something in the woods. I didn't know what to do. My heart was racing, and I could feel the fear gnawing at my insides. But I knew I had to do something. So, I made a split-second decision and veered off the road, heading into the forest. The glow followed me, weaving through the trees like some kind of ghostly apparition. I could hear my friend's screams echoing through the darkness, and I knew I had to find him before it was too late. I drove deeper into the woods, my headlights cutting through the blackness like a knife. And then I saw him. My friend was lying on the ground, his body battered and bruised. But before I could reach him, the glowing figure appeared out of nowhere, engulfing him in its eerie light. I watched in horror as my friend was lifted into the air, his screams fading into the night. And then, just like that, he was gone. Vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a trail of devastation. I don't know what that thing was, or where it came from. All I know is that it took my friend, and I'll never be the same again. So if you ever find yourself driving through those dark forests at night, be careful. Because you never know what might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to claim its next victim. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be sharing a story like this. But something really creepy happened to me the other night that I just can't shake off. So, I live in this small village and I had to rush to the city to get some meds for my son. He's 18 and he's got asthma, poor kid. It was around 12:30 p.m. when I left, and let me tell you, it was dark as heck outside. So there I was, driving down this lonely road, just me and the sound of my engine. The night was quiet, eerie almost. I kept glancing at the clock, hoping I could get to the city and back as fast as possible. I didn't want my son to have an attack without his meds. As I'm cruising down the road, I notice something up ahead. At first, I think it's just my tired eyes playing tricks on me, but as I get closer, I see a figure standing there. A man. Just standing in the middle of the road. Now, I don't scare easily, but this gave me the chills. I slowed down, thinking maybe he needed help or something. But as I got closer, I noticed something strange. His face. It looked just like my son's. I mean, it was uncanny. My heart started pounding in my chest as I drove past him, trying not to make eye contact. The whole way to the city, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Who was that guy? And why did he look like my son? I tried to push it out of my mind, focusing on getting those meds and getting back home. When I finally made it back to the village, I practically sprinted to my front door, eager to see my son. And there he was, sitting on the couch, watching TV like nothing was wrong. I breathed a sigh of relief, but the memory of that man on the road still lingered in my mind. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, staring back at me. It felt like he was haunting me, like he was trying to tell me something. But what? I don't know what to make of it, honestly. Maybe it was just some weird coincidence, or maybe it was something more. All I know is, I'll never forget the feeling of fear that washed over me that night. And I'll definitely think twice before driving down that road again after dark.